So on July 14th, there was a shooting incident over in Fargo, North Dakota. And out here, you don't hear a lot of this kind of stuff happening on a regular basis. And yes, Fargo is a major city, but it's still in North Dakota. And this was a pretty big incident. It left one officer killed in action, as well as two officers critically wounded. It was a very tragic event. Of course, the shooter themselves was also taken out, but this isn't something you hear about in this area very often. And you may have heard about it, but most likely you didn't, because it's not getting mainstream media coverage, although there's a lot of reasons why you would assume it would based on some of the information that came out of this shooting incident so far. And there are some lessons to be learned because of this incident that I wanted to share with everybody here, because I thought it was relevant to our preparedness, as well as to remind you of the way things are going here in this country. It doesn't matter where you live anymore. It doesn't matter if you live in North Dakota with barely any population, or all the way in California. You can live in the major city, you can live in the suburbs, you can live in a quiet part of the country. Regardless, these things can happen anywhere at this point in time. And there are people out there perpetrating these acts regardless of location. So you do need to do what you can to be prepared for something like this to happen no matter where you are. Now, I do need to mention the biggest supporter of the channel is Midway USA. And of course, they always help me prepare when it comes to self-defense and anything else I might need regarding some of these situations we're about to discuss. So big thanks to Midway USA for always helping me out. Now, there are some reasons why this isn't getting mass media coverage, and you'll be aware of that here very soon, but there are reasons why you would assume it would have based on some of the things that this person had access to and what they had with them and what they were probably planning on doing thereafter, okay? So first off, what happened? Well, we had police and firefighters responding to an accident, just an unrelated car accident, where this situation unfolded, and the police are approaching the accident, firefighters are on the scene, and then this individual was basically staking out the area, driving around nonchalantly, and then decided to engage these officers from their vehicle, all right? So they engaged the officers. I think they were using probably some sort of AR-15 variant, and 3 officers were shot. Like I said, one unfortunately lost his life, and the other 2 are still in critical condition. And then the shooter was taken out by another officer eventually, okay? So there's some lessons to be learned here and things I want you to keep in mind. First off, this happened somewhere that no one would expect it to happen. So no matter where you are, you have to keep some sort of situational awareness, okay? Now, this person, after the investigation and everything started going through, was found to have 1,800 rounds of ammo, multiple long arms, multiple pistols, tons of magazines. Some of the magazines even had US flags on them, which I thought was interesting considering some of the information we're going to go over here in just a second. And they had homemade explosives as well, including a homemade hand grenade. And so you would think that all this stuff, including the tactical gear they had, would make mainstream media, because it's pretty much the exact MO that they usually pounce on when it comes to pushing gun control and things of that nature. However, the surprising part about maybe the US flags on the magazines and the behavior involved and everything else, and the fact that the media is not picking up, maybe is a little bit less surprising when you find out that the suspect's name was Mohammed Barakat. So this is happening here in Fargo, North Dakota. And of course, that whole situation doesn't fit the narrative as to what the media and the government's been pushing for quite some time now. So you might not have heard about it, but this is a legitimate attack that happened here in a very small state. Yes, in one of the more major metropolitan areas of the state, but still in North Dakota of all places. And not a lot of people are hearing about it. Now, other lessons to be learned from this situation, okay? First off, someone who has the access to that kind of equipment, you know, could be anybody, right? It doesn't matter where you live. People who are making explosives in their apartment could be right next to you in your apartment. That's what you need to know, is that just because you live somewhere nice or because you live somewhere that's less nice doesn't really make a difference. These people could be right next door for all you know. The other thing to keep in mind is this individual had tons of magazines, 1,800 rounds, additional long arms and pistols and everything else, right? What do you have? I mean, I'm just saying, if this guy is out here trying to perpetrate that type of an attack, do you even have the same amount of equipment or supplies that somebody like this has? I mean, these are just questions that I think about when I start to read into these articles and pick apart the data. I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying it's something to consider, that people who want to go out and do harm are prepared to that level, and what level are you prepared to, right? Now, another interesting data point from this whole situation was that during the shootout, and I found this to be very interesting and something you should definitely keep in mind. During the shootout, the shooters most likely AR-15 variant of some kind, because they just called it a .223 rifle in the news report. So I think we all know what that means generally, right? The shooter's AR was shot by the police officer who was responding with a 9mm handgun and actually taken out of the fight. So the AR-15 was actually completely disabled because the police officer shot it with a 9mm handgun. And that goes to remind you too that during some type of kinetic event or something like that that could be happening, your gun might go down. Something catastrophic can happen to your weapons platform, no matter how expensive it is, no matter how Gucci it is, no matter how much money you've invested, something can go wrong. And so, of course, the suspect then switched over to a pistol, and that led to his ultimate demise, as that officer was not going to back down and eventually engaged and handled the situation appropriately. And like I said, this person needed to go. Like, that's just how this works in this situation at that point, right? Did I mention that this person also shot a bystander? So 3 police officers shot, 1 killed in action, 2 critically wounded. Fire department was fired upon, but nobody got shot. But a bystander, I believe an innocent woman who just happened to be on the block, because this was just in a normal intersection in Fargo, she was shot like twice, I believe. So even if you're not involved, you might still get shot based on what's happening in the situation. Let's keep that in mind as well, because that is something to be aware of if you're ever around an active shooter scenario. Just because you're not directly involved doesn't mean you're not going to get hit, right? The other thing to keep in mind is that this person had to go and obviously was out there to hurt people, not just police. I mean, they shot an innocent bystander. So it can kind of tell you exactly what their plans were moving past that. And had they not been stopped by that police officer, who knows how much more they would have done, and considering how much equipment they had with them, especially when you think about things like homemade explosives. Now, this AR-15 being disabled by a pistol, it's one thing to keep in mind in case you are ever dealing with an shtf style event and you're worried about defending yourself. Do you have a backup or redundancy system? There's been a lot of movement towards more of like a recce style loadout for people, based on the fact that we need to be light, we need to be fast, we might have to go do reconnaissance and scouting, and we're not going to bring a pistol with us because it's extra weight and we're likely not going to need it because we'll have our rifle or whatever, right? Just keep that in mind. I mean, that's a decision you have to make, and a calculated risk you have to take. If you're not going to have a pistol on you, you won't have anything to switch to if that rifle goes down. And if it can go down as easily as by being shot by a 9mm handgun, then it's something to consider. So I wanted to share this because it's not getting mainstream media attention, but it had a lot of things that we could learn from it. This suspect, shooter, whatever you want to call him, a-hole, was in his vehicle when he started opening fire on these police. So he had a level of concealment and possibly some level of cover by being in that vehicle, which meant he was harder to engage than the police who were just walking on foot in the road. It's another thing to keep in mind. And nobody expected it because it's Fargo, North Dakota. They're just responding to an accident, unrelated. Why would you expect it? But it happened. So keep all these things in mind. Doesn't matter where you are. You might want redundancies. Doesn't matter if you're involved. Bad things can happen. And we need to be on the lookout for this kind of stuff, because if it's happening up here in North Dakota, I mean, I would expect it to happen just about anywhere. So hopefully that gave you some things to think about. If you need anything else from me, go to magicprepper.com. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.